Zara Ellison texted her roommate at 11:47 p.m. 4 words. Leaving now, 5 minutes. She had sent that exact text, or something close to it, at least 200 times before. Same parking garage, same level 3, same spot near the stairwell, because she'd read once that staying close to exits was safer. She was on the phone with her mother when she walked out of the library that night, backpack over one shoulder, keys already in her hand, not fumbling for them in the car, the way they warn you not to. She had them ready. She was careful. She was always careful. Her roommate, Destiny, waited 20 minutes before she started to get annoyed. Waited another 20 before she started to get worried. It was the full hour before she finally called the campus emergency line. And even then, she almost didn't, because she kept telling herself there had to be a normal explanation. Car trouble, dead phone, stopped for gas. The mind will bend itself into impossible shapes before it accepts the thing it doesn't want to accept. Campus security pulled the garage footage within the hour. The camera on level 3 was angled toward the elevator, not the stairwell, a detail that would quietly devastate the investigators who reviewed it later. What they had was partial. Zara enters the frame from the left, walking steadily, phone still at her ear, reaching her car, keys touching the door handle, and then the frame just ends. Not because the footage cuts out, because she steps out of range into the 2-foot blind spot the camera had always had, that nobody had ever thought to fix. That was the last documented image of Zara Ellison. The investigation stalled for weeks. No witnesses, no traffic camera footage that showed her vehicle leaving. Her phone went dark at 11:49 p.m., 1 minute and 40 seconds after her last text, and never came back on. Her car was still in the garage the next morning, locked, undisturbed, her textbook on the passenger seat still open to the page she'd been studying. It wasn't until 3 months later that the case cracked open. And when it did, the detail that emerged was the kind that makes seasoned detectives go quiet. A burner phone, recovered during an unrelated arrest, contained 34 photographs. All of Zara, none of them taken with her knowledge. There were photos of her leaving the library, timestamps spanning 6 consecutive weeks. Photos of her car in the same parking spot she always used. A photograph of her class schedule, somehow obtained, handwritten and annotated in someone else's handwriting, with the times she typically arrived and left. There was a photo of her front door. There was a photo of her getting coffee on a Tuesday morning, laughing at something on her phone, completely at ease, completely unaware. He had been watching her for 6 weeks before she disappeared. 6 weeks of her life she lived in total confidence. Going to class, calling her mother, texting Destiny, choosing the spot near the stairwell because she was careful, while someone cataloged her every movement with the patience of a person who had already decided how this ended. 2 miles from campus, a gas station attendant remembered a man coming in that same night. He asked about a young woman, dark coat, natural hair, small backpack. The attendant remembered it clearly, so he told investigators not because the question was strange, but because of the way the man asked it. No urgency, no emotion. Relaxed hands on the counter, the same tone you'd use to ask about the weather or the price of gas. Calm in a way that didn't fit. The attendant didn't think much of it that night. He thought about it every day after. The man connected to the burner phone was identified. He was never prosecuted. Insufficient physical evidence, the DA's office said. He is, as of this recording, a free man. Zara has never been found. She did everything right. She had her keys ready. She stayed on the phone. She parked near the exit. None of it made a single difference because he was already there, already watching, long before she ever walked through that garage door. Maren Solis had worked the night shift at Riverside General for 3 years, and in 3 years, she had never once called in sick. Her co-workers talked about that after she disappeared. The way people reach for details that feel like they explain something, even when they don't. She was dependable. She was the kind of nurse who stayed 20 minutes past the end of her shift to make sure the handover was clean. She cared about getting things right. On the morning of April 9th, she finished her 3rd consecutive overnight shift, signed out at 6:11 a.m., and walked the same route she had walked hundreds of times before, down the east corridor, through the side exit, across the lower level of the parking structure to her car in spot 114. She never made it out of the lot. A co-worker named Britta, we interviewed 2 days after Maren was reported missing, mentioned something she'd almost forgotten. Earlier that week, during a break, Maren had said offhandedly that she kept seeing the same gray car parked near hers 3 times in 1 week, always in the same general area. She laughed when she said it. Hospital parking was a nightmare. Everyone fought for the same spots. It probably meant nothing. Britta had agreed. They'd moved on to something else within 30 seconds. That gray car was registered to a man named Douglas Creel, 38. He had been a patient in the Riverside General Emergency Department approximately 2 months earlier. A minor incident, treated and discharged within 4 hours. Maren had been his assigned nurse. Investigators found his journal in the 3rd week of the search. He had written her name 41 times across 17 pages. Not obsessively, not frantically, methodically, neatly. There were entries noting her shift schedule, which he had apparently pieced together through repeated visits to the hospital's public-facing areas. He had noted the color of her scrubs on different days. He had written down her car's make, model, and a partial plate number. And on the 4th page, in handwriting that investigators described as disturbingly composed, he had written, "She smiled at me like she knew me. She does know me. She just doesn't know it yet." She had smiled at him because that was who Maren was. She smiled at every patient. She made people feel like they were the only person in the room, because at that moment, to her, they were. It was the quality that made her exceptional at her job. It was the quality Douglas Creel had taken and built an entire architecture of obsession around. He had been watching her for 2 months. He had learned her routine with the same quiet patience as the man who photographed Zara Ellison, studied her movements, identified her patterns, and located the precise geography of her vulnerability. The parking structure, the early morning, the exhaustion after a 3rd consecutive overnight. The moment when even the most careful person is running on empty and just wants to get to their car and go home. The security camera at the parking structure exit captured the gray car at 6:17 a.m., pulling out 2 vehicles behind Maren's. It followed her onto the street. That was the last time her car appeared on any camera in the city. Her phone went dark exactly 800 meters from the hospital, in a stretch of road that sat in a dead zone between 2 camera coverage areas. A gap so specific, so deliberate, that investigators concluded he had walked or driven that route in advance, mapping exactly where the city stopped watching. Maren's car was found 4 days later, abandoned on a rural road 60 miles away. Wiped clean. Not a print, not a fiber, Not a single trace of anything useful. Douglas Creel was brought in for questioning twice. He was released both times. Her family posts her photo every year on her birthday. She would have turned 32 this past March. He sat in her section of the ER and watched her save someone's life. He watched her work and he made a decision. Quiet, certain, final. Marin never saw it happen. She was too busy taking care of everyone else to notice that someone had already chosen her. She never got a chance to make a decision of her own. Callum Voss was the kind of person who was most himself when he was alone. Not in a troubled way. His sister Petra was always careful to say that when she spoke about him. He had friends. He was warm, funny in a dry, understated way. The person at dinner who listened more than he talked and remembered everything you'd said 3 months later. But the mountains were where he exhaled. 2 days on a backcountry trail with his camera, and no signal was to Callum what other people got from a week at the beach. He had completed the Harrow Ridge Trail 12 times over 6 years. He knew every switchback. He knew where the light hit the eastern face at golden hour, and which rocky outcrop gave the cleanest sight line to the valley below. On the morning he left, he posted a photo to Instagram. The ridgeline at sunrise, shot from his truck window before he'd even laced his boots. Golden light poured across the rock face like something poured from a jar. The caption said, "Back to the quiet." It got 214 likes by the time his phone lost signal an hour up the trail. One of those likes came from an account with no profile photo and no posts. It had been created 4 days earlier. It had been silently following Callum's page for 3 weeks. He was supposed to be back by Sunday evening. When Sunday became Monday and Petra still hadn't heard from him, she told herself it was a dead battery, a spontaneous extra night. The kind of thing Callum occasionally did when the light was good and the trail was calling. By Monday afternoon, she had stopped telling herself anything and called search and rescue. The team reached his campsite on day 2 of the search. Everything was there. His tent, properly staked. His pack, organized the way experienced hikers organize things. Everything in its place. His spare boots sat just inside the tent entrance. His camera was on the ground cloth beside his sleeping bag, lens cap off, like he had set it down for a moment and intended to pick it back up. The memory card was still inside. The last photographs were exactly what you would expect from Callum. The ridge at golden hour, shot after shot of the light changing across the rock, the valley filling with shadow below. They were beautiful, peaceful. The visual equivalent of the caption he had written that morning. And then there was the final frame. It took the investigator who reviewed the card almost a full minute to see it. The composition was slightly off, the camera angled a few degrees lower than the others, as though Callum had been in the process of adjusting his shot. The focus was on the ridgeline, but in the tree line behind it, perhaps 40 meters back, standing completely still in the shadow between 2 pines, there was a figure. No movement blur, no ambiguity once you saw it. A person standing in the trees, facing the camera, facing Callum. The Instagram account was traced to a terminal at a public library in a town 40 miles from the trailhead. Whoever had used it had not logged into anything else, had paid cash for nothing, and had left no record of their presence beyond the IP address tied to that single terminal. The profile had visited Callum's Instagram page 112 times over 3 weeks. Investigators reconstructed what the account had been looking at. Every tagged location across 4 years of posts, every trail, every summit, every time Callum had captioned a photo with a location or a trailhead name, he had been, without knowing it, assembling a precise and detailed map of every place he had ever been completely alone. Petra said she couldn't look at his Instagram page for months after she understood that. 3 years of beautiful photographs that she had always loved, and someone else had been using them as a blueprint. The account was deleted the day after Callum disappeared. He has been missing for 14 months. The figure in the photograph has never been identified. He went back to the quiet because the quiet was where he was most himself. And something that had spent 3 weeks studying him knew exactly where that was. The last photo he ever took proves he wasn't alone out there. He just never knew it. There is a thread running through all 3 of these stories, and it is not bad luck. It is not being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Those explanations are comfortable, and comfort is exactly what these cases refuse to offer. The thread is this: every single one of these stalkers won before the victim ever sensed a thing. Not because their targets were careless, not because they took risks or ignored obvious signs, but because each stalker had spent weeks studying the one thing their victim trusted most, and then used it against them with surgical, unhurried precision. Zara trusted caution. She had built a personal system of safety, keys ready, phone in hand, parked near the exit, and she believed that system protected her. It was a reasonable belief. It would have protected her from most dangers. But he had been watching her long enough to know her system by heart. He didn't have to overcome her caution. He just had to wait inside it. Maren trusted familiarity. 3 years of the same corridor, the same exit, the same spot 114 in the same parking structure. Familiarity felt like safety because nothing bad had ever happened there. But familiarity is a pattern. And a patient man with a journal and too much time had mapped every detail of that pattern 2 months before she ever noticed a gray car parked near hers. Callum trusted solitude. The trail was remote, the location known only to him, or so he believed. But he had been sharing his solitude publicly for 4 years, one tagged photograph at a time, building an archive that a stranger had studied 112 times from a library terminal 40 miles away. His isolation wasn't protection. In the end, it was the thing that made him most reachable. 3 different people, 3 different lives, 3 different things they believed would keep them safe, and 3 stalkers who had already done the work of dismantling each one of those beliefs long before the victim felt the first flicker of something wrong. None of these 3 people are coming home, and the men responsible in at least 2 of these cases are still free, still out there, still watching someone new, still counting on that person feeling exactly what Zara felt, what Maren felt, what Callum felt in those last ordinary moments of their lives. The quiet, reasonable, devastating certainty that everything was fine. If this story reached somewhere deep and stayed there, share it. The people in these cases deserve to be remembered, and the patterns that made them vulnerable deserve to be understood. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, because these conversations matter more than most people realize. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because the next story we tell might be the one that changes how someone thinks before it's too late. The scariest thing about a stalker isn't that they found you. It's how long they were already there before you ever felt a thing.